Welcome to The Hill's Coronavirus Report. I'm Steve Clemons, editor-at-large of The Hill. Each day, we are interviewing consequential leaders and innovators in the battle against the coronavirus. A question that has been asked virtually since the start of this pandemic is, when will students return to school? States have that oversight and will determine whether or not the fall will be the optimal for a return to normalcy where students' education is concerned. How that return could unfold is a question mark as well. The president of the American Federation of Teachers is certain it will cost more money to return to the classroom with a need for PPE, social distancing, and arrangements for transportation. The safety of both teachers and students is paramount in the quest to get back in the classroom. Senators Patty Murray of Washington State and Chuck Schumer of New York last week introduced a bill that would spend $175 billion on getting K-12 schools up and running again. My next guest believes that the measure would provide the must-haves for students and teachers at this critical time. And at this moment, the American Federation of Teachers is paying close attention to Florida, which has more than 600,000 confirmed cases of COVID-19, and where hospitalizations are beginning to outpace capacity. Meanwhile, the Florida Education Commissioner has signed an executive order requiring schools to reopen next month. Joining me now to talk about the big picture plan to get back into the classroom is President of the American Federation of Teachers, Randi Weingarten. Randi, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you want to get kids back to school, get education going again, but tell us the right way to do it, and what do you think is the wrong way to do it?
First off, we have to think about what kids have lost in the last few months, and that is why, despite the surge in cases, despite the fact that there's not a vaccine, teachers and our union have been working on a plan to reopen schools since the beginning of April. This is it. We believe that we have to reopen in a far better way than the haphazard way that schools were closed and the economy was paused. We know that's important for kids. We know that's important for parents. We know that teachers want it. In fact, we just did a poll that showed that about 3/4 of teachers, if we had the safety conditions that were possible to reopen, would want to reopen in-person learning. But this is the key, Steve. Safety. SAFETY. We spend a lot of time thinking about safety of bars. We spend a lot of time thinking about safety of office buildings. We spend a lot of time thinking about safety for astronauts, for our veterans, for our armed forces. We need to spend as much time thinking about safety of our kids and of our educators. And there are obvious things that have to happen. And those start with the physical distancing and the masks, cleaning a school and ventilation, making sure you make provisions for those who are at risk, and making sure we are attentive to the emotional and the instructional needs of children. This is not, this is not magical thinking. These are things that the scientists and the physicians have said we need to do, and ultimately they cost money and they require rethinking and reimagining what school looks like in Florida as early as August, and in the Northeast and the Midwest as early as September. And what we're concerned about is that now the Trump administration has woken up to the fact that none of these things are in place. They have really angry parents all across the nation, and they have only themselves to blame because they have refused to negotiate a new package to create the funding that is needed, and they have refused to put any guidance out whatsoever but the CDC guidance that we pressed for to actually have what is safe, what is a safe reopening.
I just mentioned Florida and what's happening there. And this week I spoke to Eduardo Padron, the president emeritus of Miami-Dade College, and he was telling me that it is nonsensical, given the spike of COVID cases, to just order schools to reopen. But they've received that order. I mean, is this a train wreck that we're seeing in real life, with real
Yes.
consequences?
Yes, it's a train wreck, and it is par for the course for the Trump administration, because Betsy DeVos has sat on her hands. She hasn't put one bit of guidance out. We wrote a letter to Azar and to DeVos, letters back in March. Like, we've been at this since the beginning of February. And sorry if I sound so angry, but I am. We've been at this since the beginning of February saying, what's going on with COVID? We know that there's something here that's more significant than just a flu. And we've heard crickets from both of them. So now, because parents, are up in arms, and they rightfully should be, and now because all Trump cares about is his jobs numbers, and he knows that, if parents can't send their kids to school, they can't reopen the economy more broadly. Now he's holding, he's doing full cap tweets saying schools must reopen. But either they are completely ignorant about what it takes to reopen schools, or they are completely callous and craven in their attempts to do so. What is happening in Florida right now is terrible. If you understand 1 second of the science, you cannot reopen schools 5 days a week, 9 to 3 or 8 to 3 for every single kid that we want to teach, and we want to we want to embrace. That essentially the safety standards require basically 50% capacity. The cleaning standards require that you clean schools all the time. So where is the money for the extra even if you did a staggered approach, which is what New York and other places are contemplating right now? Where's the money for the cleaning? Where's the money for the PPE? Where's the money for the services? Where's the money for the nurses and for the therapists? And you have crickets in Florida. You just essentially have this magical thinking. Opening schools is not the magical kingdom. Opening schools requires real thought for teachers and parents and kids. And this is what's going to happen if there's not real thought to it. You're going to see a huge number of parents and kids and teachers basically say it's not safe for us.
Well, Andy, you're a person that has worked across the aisle. You've worked with a lot of Republicans, Senator Lamar Alexander and others. Do they hear you? Do they worry about what it's going to take by way of money and funding to get the right health guardrails back in the schools?
Well, I think, Senator Alexander does. Before McConnell went on break, Senator Alexander said it's going to take money to reopen schools. I had a great conversation with him where he completely understands this. He's been a governor. He's been a college president. He understands the nitty gritty of what it takes. But what is so perplexing to me is why McConnell would have gone on break without dealing with the legitimate needs of states and schools, particularly to do what they want to do. I mean, everybody should be in the same place about the needs of kids not being addressed by remote education. I think the only person who believed remote education was good was Betsy DeVos, because, she's either held stock in K-12 Inc., which is a virtual remote place, or because she, wants to keep on disabling or defunding public education. But other than that, I haven't heard anybody on either side of the aisle that thought what happened in the last 3 months was good. They thought that teachers were heroic, and they are, for engaging kids, and changing their teaching practices in the course of 24 hours to go from in school to remote. But we know that kids are missing out in terms of the engagement and social isolation. I agree with the pediatricians on that. But ultimately, we need to keep schools safe, and particularly in a place like Florida, where the increase of cases is completely defying the president's own guidelines about how to reopen. So So it's clear. I mean, to me, this is lunacy. But if and I've studied this, and this is my job to try to figure this out. But take a parent who's not a scientist, take a teacher who's not a scientist, who's just getting all these mixed messages. What are they supposed to think about? What the president is doing, what DeSantis is doing, is just creating high anxiety. What we've learned from Europe and from their very effective ways of reducing the virus is you need to have a consistent public health message over and over again. You need people to communicate and collaborate around it, and you need to fund it. And that is why their schools have started to be open, and that is why our schools, even for the summer, for summer voluntary summer school, couldn't get open, and that's why you're seeing more and more consternation about what's going to happen in the fall.
Well, I hate to ask this because, you've already kind of described very beautifully a horrible storm of situations that have to be dealt with. But on top of this, we have the Black Lives Matter protests, the murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and others. And so I guess the question is, in this moment, I often wonder, how do we become less reactive and more proactive? How do you get from the mess you're in into this? And I'm just wondering, is there anyone out there kind of looking back to the 1930s and saying, we created structures, we created the WPA. Can we use this opportunity of reinvesting in something like education in schools to fix some of the problems in the social contract? Is that discussion going on anywhere?
Well, it's going on in the Joe Biden campaign. It's going on. I was honored to serve as part of the joint Bernie Joe platform committee on K-12 and higher education, and it went on plenty there. You're going to see a lot of that in his platform for America. I think you have a huge ideological divide right now, and you could see it, frankly. So the answer is this makes schools more important. It makes investing in schools more important. Part of what is driving us, and I know my own members, when you ask them the question about why should we open up schools and what's the best reason, they'll not say that. For them, reopening the economy is last. For them, it's meeting the needs of kids is first, and they understand, just like so many of us do, that we are in the middle of three crises. We're in the middle of a pandemic that made the economic inequality worse, and we're in the middle of a racial reckoning that should have happened, generations ago. And then all of these things make what happens in schools even more important, and it makes dealing with the well-being needs of kids even more critical. Every social issue hits the schoolhouse door. So I hear Biden talk about it all the time. I hear, frankly, Democrats and some Republicans talk about it. But what you're seeing is that Trump is making it worse. And frankly, you saw this in terms of even PPE and the reports about PPE. PPP was a program out of CARES 2 that was attempting to make sure that small businesses and other businesses in this economic pause could keep hiring, could keep their staff intact, and could keep their businesses alive. And who were the first groups to rush to get it? Groups that don't even believe in government, like the Ayn Rand Institute and Grover Norquist, Cayenne West. And who is still struggling to try to get money for, or Kanye West, sorry, who's still struggling to try to get money so that we can reasonably reopen schools? Kids and teachers. So what does that say about our economy and our country right now? That the handouts were there for those who actually didn't need it and for those who don't believe in it. And then but the hand ups that we really need for kids and for states who have been continuing to do the essential services As the president abdicated any responsibility for COVID, who got the responsibility? States like New York, like New Jersey. They've been shelling out lots of money to get things done. Think about the New York City subways. Every single night they're being cleaned to ensure safety for the passengers. All of this costs money, and yet they've been shelling it out. They haven't gotten the recovery packages they needed, and yet even the people who don't believe in government, like Grover Norquist, got the package he needed. Now, I think everybody needed something in terms of this, enforced pause of the economy, but don't put the people who need it most last. And what the Biden people are talking about is, how do you reimagine society like what happened in the New Deal?
So we've just got a couple of minutes, but I wanted to come in on that point real quick. Secretary DeVos, I know, has been pushing that public schools or private schools have access to funding and support right now. Has she been as equally supportive of public schools?
No. In fact, what happened is Secretary DeVos took private schools and parochial schools get a lot of public money through transportation, through other types of things. The issue in terms of Secretary DeVos is where her attention is. She's done nothing, nothing for kids in public schools, but she rushes in to help any kid who goes to a religious school. All we're asking for is give some attention to kids in public schools, and what she's done is she's taken the money that goes to low-income kids in public schools to give it without accountability to a parochial school or to a private school.
And finally, Randi, I know we've talked about in the past that the AFT, your network of teachers around the country, were already doing interesting things online with each other, like sharing their lessons online, which you had created. I'd love to hear, just as we close, any stories of those cool, innovative things that teachers are doing to try and connect with their students while they're not able to meet in person-to-person classes.
So teachers probably now know more about remote education than anyone in Silicon Valley, because teachers have had to do the kind of, oh my God moment and deal with remote education for the last 3 months. And I have, spent several hours talking to teachers who have been through this, and they've learned a lot. So there's a couple of things that I just want to throw out. Number one, we started this idea, and all of this is on Share My Lesson, and all of that is for free. We make it free for anyone. You don't have to be a union member to get access to this sharing site. But, we tried to end up summing up the year with capstone projects, and we came up with several that were geared developmentally to early grades, to middle grades, and high school years, as ways that teachers could work with students to cap their years. And those are all on Share My Lesson. But the second thing is, teachers found amazing ways. They would find an old blackboard that they had in a garage and use it for their lessons. They, found all sorts of different things to wear to make their kids laugh. They went into, in a proper physical distance, would sit on a kid's lawn and engage in one-to-one storytelling. Teachers were telling me, particularly in the older grades, how they did what we call now asynchronatic learning, which is, they tape a lecture that a student could listen to any time during the day so that they could deal with the family balance, and then, reinforce it, in group learning. The virtual choirs that you see, the virtual choruses that you see have taken hours and hours and hours to do, but any of them would just have a handkerchief when you're watching them. It's been amazing to watch the love coming through Zoom in terms of the engagement that teachers have done with their students.
Well, Randi Weingarten, President of the American Federation of Teachers, thank you for those stories, and thank you for what you're doing and sharing it with us. We look forward to having you back again. Thank you so much. And thank all of you for joining me today. I'm Steve Clemons. We'll see you tomorrow. Be well.